The Royal Scots in Northern Ireland, 1970 to 2002. In August 1969, the army was deployed onto the streets of Londonderry to assist the Royal Ulster Constabulary in managing riots that had followed protests by the civil rights movement. By October, 10 infantry battalions were helping to police the province, mainly in Londonderry and Belfast. For the next 33 years, the army provided internal security under Operation Banner, first protecting Protestant Unionists and Catholic Republicans from each other, and then countering the various factions of the self-styled Irish Republican Army and Loyalist paramilitaries throughout the province, until the Good Friday Agreement eventually brought peace. Force levels varied in response to the intensity of terrorist activity, peaking at some 22,000, including 27 infantry battalions and several other units in the infantry role. Operation Banner dominated army commitments throughout the period, despite the major campaigns of the Falklands, the Gulf, and Iraq. In the course of Operation Banner, 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots, carried out 13 operational tours, totalling 7.5 years. 7 Royal Scots and 2 from attached corps were killed or died in accidents. In the course of Operation Banner, the 1st Battalion carried out 13 operational tours, totalling 7.5 years, as summarised below. The 1st Battalion was the first battalion to deploy from the British Army of the Rhine, and the 1st Scottish Battalion on Operation Banner. Although the provisional IRA emerged and commenced bombings and shootings during this tour, rioting was more frequent. Belfast was, and remains, a divided city. Interfaces were often flashpoints for sectarian violence, sometimes sparking riots, several hundreds, even thousands strong. Humber one-ton armoured vehicles, known for their appearance as pigs, provided mobility and protection. Patrols replaced police and often had to escalate their posture at little or no notice. In June, it became apparent that IRA weapons were hidden in the Lower Falls area. As searching commenced, a mass exodus made for Andersonstown in the southwest of the city, some with concealed weapons. Major rioting broke out, and searching continued for days. 1 OBE, 2 MBEs with gallantry clasps, 1 BEM with gallantry clasp, and 1 Queen's Commendation were awarded. In May 1971, the 1st Battalion moved from Tidworth at short notice to a factory at Drumahoe to the east of Londonderry that had been taken over as temporary accommodation. From there, companies deployed to village halls in various towns around County Londonderry with a view to patrolling both County Londonderry and County Antrim. The purpose of these rural operations was to both reassure the law-abiding population and to inhibit IRA activity. Mobile patrols conducted roadblocks to search motor vehicles, while foot patrols engaged with the communities and remained alert to any untoward activity. A number of searches were carried out, and one found a significant quantity of explosives. Other tasks included observing border crossing points between Londonderry and Donegal, and alerting all lighthouse and Coast Guard stations along the Antrim coast to expect IRA gun runners. Unlike the previous year in Belfast, when confrontations were commonplace, there were few during this tour. Also in July were sporadic intersectarian disturbances in Londonderry City, which necessitated the 1st Battalion to occupy Blythe Lane compound and the derelict Mountjoy prison. The map shows the old walled city defended by the Protestant garrison in 1690 and contentious ever since. The pace and frequency of AMF deployments to the flanks of NATO were such that a period of consolidation had become necessary. However, it was not to be. Shortly after one such deployment, the 1st Battalion was sent to Belfast for a 4-month emergency reinforcement, necessitated by the Republican backlash to internment. This was a measure whereby the Royal Ulster Constabulary could arrest on suspicion and imprison without trial. The benefits of this were short-lived and stored up long-term resentment in the Catholic population. On this tour, in October 1971, the battalion deployed to the largely Protestant Shankill area and the adjacent Catholic enclave of Ligonier. Both areas remained relatively incident-free throughout the tour, the duration of which was reduced by a month, and the battalion returned to Tidworth at the end of December, just in time for a 2-month deployment to Norway. Now recognising the scale of the emergency, the Ministry of Defence issued the clasp Northern Ireland to be worn on the General Service Medal ribbon. As the Northern Ireland situation became increasingly volatile by June 1972, 1RS was warned to deploy once again to Belfast, the advance party at only 24 hours' notice. This 4th tour, more than any other infantry battalion at the stage, made the 1st Battalion the most experienced battalion in the province. On the 25th of June, the IRA announced a ceasefire, and aspects of the Operation Banner posture were scaled back commensurately. Not to be upstage, the Unionists declared no-go areas to match those they claimed the Republicans had formed. This prompted a response from Republicans demanding to march on Belfast city centre, halted by A Company in support of the Royal Ulster Constabulary. On such occasions, the security forces could be outnumbered by up to 300 to 1. The July marching season brought Orange Order attempts to march provocatively into Republican areas, with considerable policing challenges. At the peak, on the 12th of July, the 1st Battalion covered the main parades. Earlier in July, William Whitelaw, as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, had held secret talks with Irish Republican Army representatives to try to find a solution, but the IRA made unreasonable demands. The situation deteriorated, and the breaking of the IRA ceasefire seemed inevitable. On the 14th of July, the IRA broke their ceasefire in Leonardtown Avenue in southwest Belfast by engineering an incident around a housing matter. Hundreds of Republicans took to the streets to threaten L Battery, 2nd Field Regiment Royal Artillery, and their base Fort Neary at the top of the avenue. The 1st Battalion was deployed with B Company astride the avenue. One B Company barrier was rammed by 2 lorries carrying furniture, but these were pushed back by Saracen armoured cars. Suddenly the crowd disappeared, and the IRA ambush was sprung with heavy rifle and machine gun fire from houses along the avenue and from the flats at the top. Fire was returned against identified targets, and the B Company Sergeant Major silenced the machine gun with his sniper rifle, although another IRA machine gun opened up. A platoon in pigs raced to the top of the hill, the other 2 platoons clearing the houses on either side. Support Company provided cover from the bottom of the avenue, and A Company secured the left flank. The left-hand platoon relieved Fort Neary, while the right-hand platoon secured the flats. The mission had been achieved without any Royal Scots casualties. 1 military cross was awarded. However, violence increased and culminated on the 21st of July, Bloody Friday, when 26 bombs in Belfast in 2 hours killed 11 civilians and injured 30 others. Re-establishing the rule of law in an IRA no-go area in the Republican part of Londonderry City was known as Operation Motorman. The 1st Battalion was tasked to secure an area of the Cregan housing estate in an operation in which no less than 12,000 troops were involved in one capacity or another. On the 29th of July, the 1st Battalion moved to Drummahole Factory to the east of Londonderry. Intelligence indicated there could be stiff resistance and casualties were expected. Such was the threat assessment that a Royal Engineers armoured vehicle with a demolition gun and a dozer blade was employed to clear several of the barricades, some of which were believed to have been mined. The 1st Battalion crossed its start line at 0400 hours on the 31st of July. After some exchanges of fire, the southern part of the Cregan was secured by 0800 hours without any Royal Scots casualties. By that night, follow-up operations were underway, with patrols reassuring law-abiding citizens and intelligence-led searches for arms. The list of finds was impressive. One Royal Scots search alone discovered 56 assorted firearms, over 15,000 rounds of ammunition, 3,000 pounds of explosives, 13 radio sets, and a large quantity of military clothing, subversive literature and other items. The tour ended on the 6th of August and the battalion returned to Tidworth. There is a South Armagh saying that between Carrickmacross and Crossmaglen there are more rogues than honest men. West Belfast and South Armagh were acknowledged to be the most challenging areas in the province. Early in the tour that commenced in December 1975, the Irish Republican Army murdered 12 Protestant workers. The media referred to South Armagh as bandit country, a term we did not acknowledge. A and B companies operated on foot, often deploying by helicopter. In Newry, C Company stopped a tanker bearing 2 tons of explosive heading for Belfast. The risk of an improvised explosive device, IED, was extremely high. One A Company patrol turned the tables on IRA bombers with a military medal and a mention in dispatches awarded. Many patrols were jointly with the Royal Ulster Constabulary. Further north, Support Company patrolled by Land Rover. Following near misses and a political decision not to revert to foot patrolling, one mobile patrol was caught by a culvert bomb, killing 3, our first fatalities of Operation Banner. The battalion base at Esbrook became the busiest helicopter base in Europe. A BBC panorama film about the 1st Battalion in South Armagh is available on YouTube. After an interlude as the NATO Nuclear Escort Battalion in BAOR and on returning to Redford Barracks in Edinburgh, history seemed to repeat itself with the deployment to the same area of Belfast as during the first tour in 1970. Once again, in February 1980, battalion headquarters was in the Springfield Road Police Barracks, as Royal Ulster Constabulary stations were then called, with companies deployed to support an RUC increasing in confidence and capability in White Rock, Ballymurphy, Turf Lodge and Woodburn. The 1st Battalion covered the area of West Belfast that was largely Republican. By now, most police stations were fortified to withstand IRA attacks by vehicle bomb, rockets and machine gun. Despite such violence, ordinary citizens went about their legitimate business. Unlike the first Belfast tour, when civil disorder and riots were the staple, The principal threats now were sophisticated IED attacks, sniping, and machine gun attacks. The experience of South Armagh had made us proficient in avoiding and countering these forms of attack. Furthermore, joint RUC and Army intelligence gave us an edge. Nevertheless, certain areas were very hostile and required expert patrolling. Company bases maintained surveillance and mounted operations that caught armed terrorists and found caches of weapons and ammunition. The tour was marred by the accidental death of one of our Royal Army Pay Corps clerks. On completing the tour, Commander Land Forces for the entire province wrote, "After 4 impressively successful months, the determined and imaginative way you dominated your demanding area undoubtedly deterred the terrorist. Your cheerful professionalism won the admiration of many, and set a splendid example to those who follow." An OBE and a mention in dispatches were awarded. Based in Abercorn Barracks at Ballykinler in South Down, along with families, the 1st Battalion became a Province Reserve Battalion from March in 1981, ready to react anywhere it might be required, but usually in the 3 brigade counties of Armagh, Tyrone and Fermanagh. Ballykinler had amenities for the families and was a pleasant base for the companies between deployments. B Company, in the close observation role, was tasked by Headquarters 3 Brigade, acting on RUC intelligence. The other companies deployed in succession for a month at a time to the border where the IRA was active, often under command of other units. At first, company deployments were to Fork Hill and later to Dromad Barracks in Armagh with detachments at Middletown and Caledon. The IRA frequently tried to blow up the Kilnasaggart railway bridge near Fork Hill in attempts to disrupt the line between Belfast and Dublin, but never succeeded. Whereas patrols from Fork Hill and Middletown could be mounted on foot, deployments from Dromad were by helicopter. One accidental death occurred on one such deployment. At intervals, companies reinforced operations to contain Republican unrest prompted by hunger strikers among the IRA prisoners in Her Majesty Prison Maze. The operational tempo was not sustained at a higher rate as during shorter emergency tours, and there were opportunities for military skills competitions and sport, with the battalion winning the 2 major soccer trophies and runner-up at squash and cross-country running. There were also impressive results in 7-a-side rugby, 6-a-side hockey, and 5-a-side soccer. Every aspect of an infantry battalion in Northern Ireland was different to being mechanised in the British Army of the Rhine, from where the 1st Battalion deployed after extensive training in December 1987. This 5th tour in Belfast saw an increasingly confident Royal Ulster Constabulary establishing a measure of community policing, much resented by the IRA. The threat of sniping and bomb attack remained, but there were improvements in intelligence, tactics, radios and equipment. The 1st Battalion was the first to deploy to the province with the new SA-80 rifle. Close-quarter shooting accounted for an IRA gunman and the award of a Queen's Commendation. The Faker torch was developed, zeroed with the SA-80 to illuminate dark alleys, ending IRA drogue grenade attacks that had injured several RUC in Belfast, and preventing any at Londonderry. Battalion headquarters and B Company were in North Howard Street Mill, from where B Company controlled the Peace Line and the Lower Falls, in one operation catching a gunman preparing to ambush a patrol. A Company covered the housing estates of Ballymurphy and Turf Lodge. C Company operated at street level and in the high-rise Divis Flats. We were very pleased that our Colonel-in-Chief visited during the tour. An OBE and a Queen's Commendation were awarded. One senior RUC officer stated that this had been the busiest period of his 40 years service to date. Civil disturbances, bomb clearances and non-fatal shootings were frequent occurrences in Belfast, but would have been considered major incidents on mainland Great Britain. However, in March 1988, a series of events were categorised as major incidents even by Belfast standards. 3 IRA terrorists attempted a bomb attack on the Gibraltar garrison, but were foiled by the Special Air Service Regiment. There followed widespread disorder in Republican areas, including in the 1RS area of responsibility. In anticipation of further disturbances, the 1st Battalion was reinforced by 4 companies of the Brigade and Province Reserve, doubling the battalion's strength. Tension heightened with the repatriation of the Gibraltar Three and culminated on the day of their funeral. A Unionist paramilitary attacked the funeral in Milltown Cemetery with grenades and a pistol, but was caught by the RUC. Some days later, a Republican march took place in Andersontown. By now, the RUC took the lead in controlling all such large gatherings, so there was no longer any close Royal Scots involvement. It would have passed off without incident, but for 2 Royal Signal soldiers in a civilian car driving through the area which had been placed out of bounds to such traffic. The mob attacked and murdered both before either RUC or A Company could reach them. Having fought with distinction in the Gulf War, the 1st Battalion was posted from Burl in Germany back home to Scotland. The battalion's base was now Fort George near Inverness. In September 1992, the battalion deployed to South Armagh for a second time. Many aspects of the tour were familiar, although basing was different, with no base in Newry. Battalion headquarters and A Company were at Bestbrook Mill, B Company at Crossmaglen, and C Company at Fort Hill. F Spinks Battery, Royal Horse Artillery, came under command at Newton Hamilton, the Sphinx having been awarded as a battle honour in Egypt during the Napoleonic Wars to, among others, F Battery and the Royal Scots. On foot and by helicopter were still the principal modes of mobility. At one of the bases, a prominent sanger was fired on repeatedly and was also subjected to an arson attack using an improvised flamethrower. Although terrorist activity increased towards the end of the tour, the media were no longer referring to South Armagh as bandit country, despite there being no doubt about the proportions of rogues to honest men from the local pub. Nevertheless, a mortar attack on Crossmaglen resulted in the serious injury of a civilian contractor. An RUC constable was shot dead near Crossmaglen while patrolling the B Company, and equally tragically, one soldier was shot dead near Fort Hill. 1RS deployed once again from Fort George in November 1995 for a third tour in South Armagh, on this occasion reinforced by 87 soldiers from 8 different gap badges, including from the Territorial Army. Despite an IRA ceasefire, activity was high. Much effort was invested in supporting RUC enforcement of the law. The 1st Battalion focused on surveillance, patrolling, and quick reaction to the various situations that developed. High levels of activity were rewarded when A Company seized a £1,300 bomb close to Crossmaglen. Not to be outdone, B Company, in a joint operation with the RUC, seized £40,000 worth of alcohol from an off licence which had neglected to obtain a licence. The RUC referred to such as ordinary decent crime as opposed to terrorism. The rogues between Carrickmacross and Crossmaglen were up to all sorts of mischief still. Meanwhile, C Company did much to make Newton Hamilton habitable again following an IRA mortar attack that had done much damage. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal paid her second visit to the battalion in Northern Ireland, this time touring all the company bases. Soon after this, the IRA bombed Canary Wharf in London, bringing that ceasefire to an end and heightening the profile of patrols until the end of the tour. In recognition of the armed forces' extended commitment to the province and elsewhere, the Accumulated Campaign Service Medal was awarded. 36-month service in Northern Ireland was a qualifying condition. By now in the air assault role in 16 Brigade based in Colchester, the 1st Battalion started to deploy to various parts of the province for their 11th tour, this time reinforced by a company of the Worcester and Sherwood Foresters Regiment. Yet another IRA ceasefire was underway, and the battalion prepared to become the Rural Reinforcement Battalion, although at first the exact nature of their duties were not entirely clear. C Company deployed to Fermanagh, where they escorted the RUC as they enforced the rule of law. The remainder of the battalion remained in Colchester until after the end of June in 1997, when it deployed to Longcash to cover the annual marching season, when Unionists attempt to march provocatively through Republican areas, often resulting in confrontation. At this time, Drumcree was a particular flashpoint. A and Recce companies were then deployed briefly into North Belfast to deter shooting, petrol bombing and general disorder before returning to Colchester. Soon after, A Company relieved C Company in Fermanagh. Prior to deploying, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal had visited the battalion while training for the tour. One RS deployed again in March 1999 from Colchester for a 4th South Armagh tour, with Corunna Company of the Duke of Wellington's regiment under command. As the battalion deployed, the Northern Ireland peace process was hanging in the balance. Selected powers were about to be devolved to the Stormont Assembly according to the 1988 Good Friday Agreement. However, there was some way to go before it would be implemented as intended. Undercurrents of violence remained from both communities. The highest degree of professionalism was required from the 1st Battalion as they supported the RUC in their return to community policing. The tour involved border surveillance from watchtowers overlooking terrorist infiltration routes, patrolling, and quick reaction to any situation that might develop. For Private Skinner, it was his first operational deployment, which he described thus. Despite workup training, being thrown in at the deep end would be an understatement. Immediately, I joined one of the watchtowers. Guard duties were demanding, but gave me a sense of importance, and I didn't want to let anyone down. Their lives were in my hands. Quick Reaction Force was fast and furious, straight away deploying to support the RUC at an incident close to the border. Once again, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal visited the battalion on operations at Besbrook, Crossmaglen and Falkhill. In August 2000, the battalion embarked on its second resident tour, this time at Shackleton Barracks near Londonderry, a former Royal Air Force Shackleton Maritime Patrol airfield. Significant changes were underway from the Good Friday Agreement, although hostility between the communities and towards the security forces continued. The Royal Ulster Constabulary had become the police service of Northern Ireland, viewed as a sellout by the Loyalists and with suspicion by Republicans. The new police service of Northern Ireland tended to be more representative of both communities, and very definitely now led on security, with the Armagh ever further into reserve. Royal Scots companies took the following busy cycle in turn. Ops 1. This was the most active, patrolling throughout the 8 Brigade area, operating against dissident IRA groups active around Magilligan and supporting the PSNI in curbing loyalist paramilitaries in Coleraine and Larne. Ops 2, 8th Brigade Reserve Company, on standby for the 8th Brigade area and further south into 3 Brigade territory, also supporting PSNI control the Holy Cross School sectarian flashpoint in North Belfast. Ops 3, guards and duties at Ballykelly, the least appealing task in the cycle. Ops 4 brought opportunity for training, adventurous training and leave. Once again, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal visited the battalion on operation. As the province wearied of violence, the IRA and its political wing, Sinn Féin, recognised that a united Ireland could not be achieved by force of arms. This led to the Good Friday Agreement, signed in 1988 by the principal paramilitary factions, the Northern Ireland political parties, the government of the United Kingdom and ERA, all with the encouragement of the international community and especially the United States. Nevertheless, some Republican and Loyalist groups still perpetuated terrorist acts, thus the army still being necessary, hence the 1st Battalion's tour at Ballykelly. Operation Banner formally ended in 2007. The 1st Battalion of the Royal Scots had suffered 5 operational and 2 non-operational deaths, and a further 2 attached from other corps died in accidents. Perversely, whereas terrorists were exempted from prosecution under the Good Friday Agreement, Her Majesty's government nevertheless permits Republican activists to bring actions against soldiers. This is an ongoing cause of anger amongst veterans. On the 4th of September 2010, old royals who had settled in the province were joined by representatives of all regimental association branches to inaugurate a Northern Ireland branch. Earlier in the day, they had unveiled a memorial in the Palace Barracks Memorial Garden, with 2 former Royal Scots padres officiating. The Memorial Garden is visited regularly, and a regimental wreath is laid annually. Having helped restore the rule of order over 13 tours, totalling 7.5 years, old royals were invited to visit Stormont in 2012, from where the rule of law was now being exercised.